Oh, I need a little more than that. This is the fourth time I've spoken in 6 days. Good morning. Thank you. I'm gonna need energy, and I'm gonna need some voice help probably. My voice is probably gonna give out here sooner or later. Thanks very much though for your time. Thanks for the college for allowing me to speak here today. In my introduction, I do have a connection with E-Town, been for quite a while, and I actually therefore have some insiders at E-Town. And I have to tell you, Dr. Williams was who first approached me to speak here, and what I found out through my insiders was I wasn't the first choice. What I actually found out was that when Dr. Williams set this date up, he realized it was Halloween, and he went after that character we're all familiar with, Michael Myers from that Halloween fame. He thought that would be a great speaker to have here on a Halloween day. But he was kind of busy and unavailable. So Dr. Williams had to go back to the drawing board and said, I need somebody scary. Who can I get? I need somebody scary. So he got a lawyer. So that's how I end up here. So if you need a costume tonight, get a briefcase, a tie, and a card, and you can scare everybody in the world. But, so I'm okay being the second choice behind Michael Myers. And I'm not really that scary. I was driving up here today thinking about long time ago when I was an undergraduate and thinking about the different speakers that I had heard over that time. Many speakers I liked, many speakers I didn't like. I was trying to categorize them as I was driving up of saying, which speakers did I like? And then once I got that group in my head, I was like, why did I like those speakers? And I was trying to find common things between the speakers. And I only found one thing. All those speakers ended early, and they found out they were my favorite speakers. So if I do end early, I don't know how long we're going to go, I expect a lot of applause. I think I was told I have about 4 hours or so to speak today. So no, we're going to have about 45 minutes together. I have an agenda of what I want to cover today. My comment will be able to be a lot more fun. If you guys have questions or have input, please, let's talk about it. If we go off the slides and off where we're going to go, that's okay too. But it'll be a lot more fun if we do it that way. Again, going 100 years back when I was in undergraduate school, one of the courses I took was a public speaking course, which you may decide by the end of this that my professor didn't do a very good job with me. But I always remember one rule that he taught us in that class, and in all the speaking I do, I always start out with that same rule, and it was a simple rule of tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today first. So when Dr. Williams first contacted me to be the speaker, way back in, I think, May, when of course you'll agree to anything that's not until October, which I did, we talked about this program, and he told me a little bit about it. He told me a little bit about the speakers that have been here before and the topics that they've covered. As we talked then, I talked a little bit about my career, my background, and the work that I've done in the community. And that led us really into a further conversation. We talked about E-Town. We talked about the different goals and guiding principles of E-Town. We talked about that one of the goals is education for service. And that really led us into talking about why not talk about some of my background and what I refer to as success through giving back. That really is what we're going to talk about today. Now, when we talk about that, or how I'm going to talk about it today, is we're going to talk about what it is, why you should be doing it, how you go about it. But I'm going to do that, I'm going to intersperse some of my personal background and my experience within that. And I do a lot of speaking. A lot of my speaking, though, is always on technical matters. I'm going to be talking to a group of business owners about the attributes of a buy-sell agreement, talk about how to navigate a nasty shareholder dispute. Those are all easy for me. Those are things that I understand. Those are my training. Those are my background. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more on the personal side. That's not something I normally do. So I may stumble a little bit. But you have to understand the story. I think we all have our own story. So that's what I'm going to try and do today is weave my story into it and talk about volunteering, what I've done, why it's important, and how it's affected me. Is that fair enough? All right. So now we have the first rule of my professor. I told you what we're going to talk about. Now let's talk about it. So again, I have to tee it up talking about my story first. So on the very personal side of this, my father's father was not a college student, not a college graduate. My father was not a college graduate. In fact, my father, for different reasons, dropped out of the high school. Actually dropped out of 8th grade. Got a GED later in life. Later in life, he became a huge reader. He couldn't get enough books to read. He gave me my love of reading and my love of libraries. But he went back, got his GED, but that was as far as he went. But he was convinced that his children were going to get a college education. So from the time I started elementary school, I knew I was going to college. I didn't know really what that meant. Either my father or my mother were college graduates, but we knew we were going to college. All of my brothers were going to college. So graduated high school, took the SATs, applied to college. It was much simpler back then. It sounds much more complicated now what goes through. Got accepted, went in. Again, didn't know really what it was all about. So I was undeclared major, of course, just kind of going through the motions. When I was finally pushed up against the wall and had to declare a major, I declared finance because I always sort of liked numbers. Again, really didn't know what that meant. Didn't really know what I was going to do with it. Then partway through my third year, I ran into a military recruiter. He talked about joining the military, talked about going through a basic training and getting a commission, becoming an officer in the military. That at least was something tangible to me. That sort of made sense. So I signed the paperwork, went home and told my father what I'd done, went back and finished my degree and joined the military. On the military side of my life, it took me to California, where I was trained as a missile combat crew commander. I like that title, so I always like to say that. I babysat nuclear missiles is what I did. I was trained at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, and then I went to F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and for 4 years sat in a launch control center, holding onto the key for Peacekeeper and Minuteman III nuclear tipped missiles. Spoiler alert, we never got any orders to do anything with them, but I did that for 4 years, and then I got lucky enough for another 4 years. Then I got attached to an inspector general team out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, so it took me back to California, inspecting bases all across the United States. So I'm out in California. I had been away from home and off the East Coast for 9+ years. My father died very suddenly, very unexpectedly, and way too young. That was a point in time in my life when I decided that I was a little bit too far from home, wanted to get back to home, and so I put my paperwork in to try and get back to the East Coast. Now, again, you got to go back with me in that time. We didn't have all the computers, so I opened up the newspaper to the classified ads, looked for a job in the civilian world for trained nuclear missile officers. There really weren't any that I could find. So that led me to my next quandary. What am I going to do now? I've got a finance degree that I've never used. I've got 9 years of military experience with nuclear missiles. So what else could you do? You go to law school. So I went to law school on the East Coast and ended up then working for Barley Snyder out of law school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's an area that I was not from and knew no one there. So I want to tee that because we're going to come back to that part, and this is why the history is important to it. We're going to come back to that part that I started out as an older lawyer, because I had already had one career in front of this, in a town that I didn't know a single soul or any businesses in. So that'll be important as we come back to that. So brings us really to the meat of what we're talking about here. Whoops, must have hit a wrong button. Why volunteer? A lot of different reasons, and I probably won't even hit all of the reasons, but I'll come back really to, I think at any one of these I could stop. My father, he raised boys. We were a camping family. We were an old-fashioned camping family. We camped in the woods in tents. My father's rule was always, wherever we camped, the campsite was always going to be a better place when we left it. That was just the rule. I think there was a book many years ago, talked about everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. This is one of those lessons. Just anything you do, anywhere you go, leave the place a little bit better. And that's really when we talk about success through giving back, when we talk about community involvement, that's really what we're talking about. Make the community a little bit better. The place where we live, the place where we interact, make that a little better. Lots of different ways to make it better, but try to make it a little bit better. It's just more fulfilling. We'll all talk about jobs. We'll go into different areas. In today's world, what we're always finding is that you're probably going to have 3 or 4 careers over your lifetime. I'm on my 3rd now, and I'm ahead of you guys. All those jobs you found and the jobs and the careers that I've been in, what I've always found is there's 20% at the top of that I love, absolutely love. It's what gets my juices going. It's what gets me going to work every day. There's 20% down at the bottom. For a lawyer, it's billable hours, it's timesheets, it's those types of things that you just hate. And then there's everything in the middle. This community involvement is the piece that can really add to that top 20% and allow you really to do things you want to do with people you want to do to make changes that you want to be part of. So it's really fulfilling. So again, it's the right thing to do. It's the fulfilling thing to do. It adds so much more to your career. Friendships. Again, it's a great way to get to know people. The friendships that you can build at these boards, where I always talk about these boards, and I'll talk about some different projects that I've been involved in, but I always talk about it whether in the legal world or in community involvement. It's when you're down in the trenches, when you're working on a matter, that's when you really get to know people. That's when you're sitting in late night meetings. That's when you're really struggling to solve an issue. That's where true relationships and friendships are built. Again, really a fulfilling part of being in the community is to get to know more people in the community, some that are like you, some that are not like you. Business networking. I guess I'm going a little bit out of order, but not too much. Business networking. Here's the ugly truth. The community involvement that we do is good for the community. It's good for our careers too, and you should never be ashamed of that. As long as you're doing the things that we talk about and doing them right and bringing value to the boards, to the community, it's okay. You're going to develop business. You're going to give people business. You're going to work with people that you learn to trust, people that are smart. And the same thing, if you're active on those community-involved boards, they're going to see you, they're going to want to do business with you, they're going to want to make opportunities for you. That's okay. Everybody understands there's a part of that in what we do in community involvement. But if that's the only part we're playing in community involvement, it shows and people know that. So as long as it's the whole picture, it's okay that part of it is a business networking piece. Stronger community is just good for business. I came to Lancaster 18 years ago. I guess, how many are from Lancaster in this room? So a small percentage. How many from Pennsylvania? Okay, we get a bigger population. I grew up in Pennsylvania, but I was not from Lancaster County. Came to Lancaster County 18 years ago. We have several offices. The office I work out of is Lancaster City. Came here 18 years ago. Like every town like Lancaster that I've been in, it always sort of had the store. Here it was Watt and Shand. And that was the anchor store. It was the downtown. That was the main store. By the time I had come here, the Watt and Shand, which was the local family-owned operation, had already closed down. It turned into a Bon-Ton. It took it over for about a year, and then it closed. And I think really that was the bottom of Lancaster when I got here 18 years ago. My office is about a block and a half from Fulton Bank, which is on the main part of Lancaster City. And back in the day when you actually got a paycheck and you took it to the bank and cashed it, I would walk from my office, I would walk down to the Fulton Bank, about a block and a half. On the left side of the street when I walked down there was not a single retail business open along those streets. What you saw was really starting back in that time, 1994, 95, 96, you saw a lot of community leaders get involved. You saw some organizations created and formed, really to look at Lancaster City and say, this is our community, it's in trouble, we need to take some actions. And now when we look at Lancaster City 18 years later, it's booming. One of the best things I heard, Lancaster City has a First Friday, which many towns across the United States have started. About 2 years ago I was downtown on a First Friday and I heard someone complaining that it was too crowded. And I thought, what a great thing to hear. What a great problem to have that there are too many people coming downtown on a Friday night. So it's that community rebuilding has been good for businesses. It has built on itself. More businesses have come downtown. More people are coming downtown. Those are all good things, and it's because, again, people stepped up and said, we need to take some actions. We need to get groups together and figure out what the problems are and how we can take care of them outside of their jobs. But again, none of these directly benefited those businesses and those business people that were there, but it benefited the community, which certainly comes very strongly as an indirect benefit to all those that are working in the community and care about the community. Delicate subjects and discussions. My rule of thumb, and some of this comes from law, but it applies to the entire world. My comment is always, it's very hard to be unreasonable with someone you know or you meet or have a relationship with. You may still disagree over an issue, but how you will do it will be very different. This community involvement, again, allows you to learn, to get to meet people in the community, and it's amazing to me. And I don't care what city you're in, and again, I've lived in cities all across the United States. They're small communities in some ways, and you run into people. And if you run into them the first time when there's an issue and you've never met them before, it's going to be dealt with one way. If you run into someone who you have served on a board with or has been on a committee of an organization you've been involved with, it's a very different discussion. From a personal standpoint, we had an issue a few years ago where we try to do business with all of our clients. We had an issue that I won't go into why, but we had to make a change. But it happened to be the business owner on the other side was someone I served on a board with 8 years ago. We went to lunch, we talked about it. Did we agree on everything? Absolutely not. But we had a great conversation because, again, we had worked with each other for years. We knew each other, we trusted each other, we respected each other. It makes such a difference to be able to have those discussions when you spread yourself out in the community and people know you. And again, it may even be a situation where two people have never met, but they've heard of the work that each has done within the community, and that brings a certain amount of respect for those conversations. Great training ground. So again, when you start out, and this was for me in the community, and we'll talk about a little bit later, when you come into your position, it's going to be a lower management position. You're going to be told what to do. You're going to be given certain tasks to do. Boards and committees of boards through community involvement give you a tremendous amount of responsibility. It's a great training ground to be in there and be given responsibilities, and very quick on a board. As long as you show up and are there, if you want to get involved, people will allow you to be involved. So this allows you, in essence, to start training yourself to move up through your organization. You start working with groups, figure out how to either be part of a team or lead a part of a team. You get to watch others, see how they interact. I talk about, I look at my success, and what I say is, I've always tried to watch people and figure out what I like that they do and what I don't like what they do. And those things they do, I try to adopt and put them in mine. This is what board work and community involvement allows you to do. Interact with people. And you're going to be sitting on boards with, again, people just like us, or we may be sitting on there with the CEO of a large organization. To see how they interact is a great, great training ground. Most people will progress with you. Again, great spot. Everybody that's doing the right thing is getting involved in the business. So a lot of times you'll be sitting on a board, you'll be sitting with 3 people just like you who may just be out of college, maybe just a couple years into their job, but they're going to move up. And again, to develop that relationship early on, you will maintain that relationship. One of the first boards I started out with that I'll talk about later was the Lancaster YMCA. At the time, the board chair is now the president, or I'm sorry, the CEO of a large banking organization. 2 years later, a younger loan officer came on who is now president of one of their regions. Developed a great relationship, a great business relationship, a great friendship with them. When I met them, again, one headed the loan programs and one was a loan officer. They all grew with us. Learning opportunities we really talked about. And I'll add one more, and it sort of goes with business, get business and give business. What we find when we get involved with these community organizations is, again, we learn the trust, we learn the relationships with each other and the respect with each other. And if we have something that could be simple, it could be I need a new roof on my house, and it happens to be a guy who owns a roofing business has served on a board with me for the last 3 years. He's the first one I'm going to call. Same thing, if he has a legal issue, I hope I'm the first one he's going to call. Again, is that why the only reason we're on and doing this work? Absolutely not. Is it part of it? Absolutely, and we shouldn't be ashamed of that part. So again, a lot of different reasons to serve on a board that's good for the community and good for your employer and good for ourselves. I'll pause there for a minute. Any questions or comments? And I'm sure we can come up with some other reasons of doing that community involvement. I tried to come up with my list, and again, my list is built on my history and my story. Please.
What community service projects and organizations spoke to you the most?
What spoke to me the most? Well, it's interesting. It's a great transition because I'm going to talk about the ones I'm involved in, and actually, you know, one of the ones I'll mention here is one of the very first ones I was on, the Literacy Council of Lancaster and Lebanon. That is an organization that primarily does 2 things. It teaches English as a second language, so our Spanish-speaking population, it helps them learn English, and it addresses the adult learner who either isn't an adequate reading level or didn't learn to read. So again, and that's why this is the personal side of this. As I said, you know, my father dropped out of school early, became a huge reader later on. That was one of the first things when I heard what that organization did. That was a passion for me of looking at that, of saying, I can't imagine being an adult in two ways. One, as an adult, not being able to read and just learn and continue to learn from that, because I think it's such a detriment if you can't read. It's just a cycle that continues to fail. And then second, I'll say as a parent, I can't imagine not sitting with a book with my children at night and reading a book to them. And we had people that we were serving at the Literacy Council that was the position they were in. So that was one of the ones that really touched my heart quickly, and that's important. So again, it was a great transition. So my volunteer history. I talked about my military background. So when I was in F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, there's an event called Cheyenne Frontier Days. Anybody know Cheyenne Frontier Days? I don't have enough cowboys and cowgirls here. And I'm a cowboy. Cheyenne Frontier Days is the largest rodeo in the United States. It's a 10-day event in Cheyenne, Wyoming. They actually shut down, it's not a huge city, but they shut down the city. And for 10 days, every cowboy comes out of the hills of Wyoming and Nebraska and Colorado, and it's a huge rodeo. The military had a strong affiliation with Frontier Days in helping. There are lots of different events go on during that 10 days. And certain units of the military were assigned certain of those events to run them. So I was in an outfit called DOV, which was Evaluations Missiles. We were assigned a certain task, and I actually, the third year I was there, I was put in charge of that task. At that point in time for me, community involvement didn't really mean anything. My mother and father were not involved in the community. I had not been up to that point. The military has a couple of really good rules. One of their rules is they love volunteers. I need 2 volunteers, you and you. That's how I ended up with my first community involvement. I was volunteered. But what I got out of it was, number one, I ran an event that was much larger than the unit I was running. It involved a lot more people and a lot more oversight. It took a ton of my time. I got to know people in the town that I had not known. I was a military guy. I lived just off base. People I knew were military people. I really didn't know many of the civilians in the town. I got to know them, built friendships with them. I did a lot with those people after the event before I left Wyoming when my mission was over there. So it was really a great experience for me. And actually, I don't think at the time I even realized how much until later on in my life. And again, all these things make up part of your story. So Carter and McRae School. So now we come back to this. I said I went to law school. I was a little bit older when I went to law school. I came to Lancaster, not from Lancaster. It's where the job was. Didn't know a soul, didn't know a single business in Lancaster besides the law firm that I was just hired to, and I was expected to build a business practice. Thought, well, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I already feel behind because I'm an older person and supposed to be doing this. So I really thought back to my time in Cheyenne and what I did and how that experience affected me. And I said, well, probably the first thing I need to do then, I probably need to just jump into anything and everything I can in the community and get to know this community and get to know these people. So the first thing that happened was Carter McRae School. The city of Lancaster had a new superintendent at that time, and she was coming around to the different businesses, and she was trying to find mentors to come into the school, to come into the inner city schools and read, do math, do simple things. Again, I was at that point, it didn't matter what it was, I was going to say yes to it, so I volunteered to be a mentor. I want to hold that. I want to come back to Carter McRae and talk about Carter McRae a little bit at the end. Literacy Council of Lancaster Lebanon, I talked about that. That was really sort of truly the first board I got involved in. And what I did was, and again, many towns have this, I've seen it before, Lancaster has what's referred to as Leadership Lancaster. I know York has it, I know other towns have it. For me, that was a great one to get involved in right away because the idea was expose you to a lot of the different organizations in the community. I did that. One of the first ones I got exposed to was Literacy Council, and it did, it spoke to me. As soon as I heard what its mission was, it spoke to me. What was Literacy Council? Literacy Council was a small organization that served both Lancaster and Lebanon counties. It had, I think at the time, it had 3.5 staff members, a very small organization, had a board of about 8, and we were very hands-on. We'd come at night, we'd stuff envelopes for fundraising. I'd go out to elementary schools. We used to do fundraisers there. I'd speak to elementary children and would encourage them. If they read a book, they got it sponsored. We did a lot of that. It was really hands-on. There was nothing strategic about it. There was nothing fancy about it. We did work, but I loved the mission and met some great people there and watched how those people interacted. Let's see, I have to look at my orders different on my sheet, I think. Leadership Lancaster, we talked about. Lancaster YMCA round 1. We had a lawyer that was on the YMCA. We'd had lawyers on the local YMCA for years. He was coming off. He came to me and he said, if I can get you on the board, would you be interested in serving the YMCA? I grew up a country kid. There wasn't YMCAs around me. I didn't know a lot about them. As I learned a little bit more about them, they're a whole picture of looking at the whole person and looking to help children from mind, body, and soul. I thought it was a great organization to be involved with, so I said yes to that. That was a great learning experience for me. I ended up being an officer in that organization and on the executive committee, including being the treasurer and the secretary. The Lancaster YMCA, the national YMCA model had spread out. The idea was that it takes a whole lot of money to serve the inner city. So YMCAs nationally had started building YMCAs in the suburbs. And they got people to join basically the gym in the suburbs, make money, and pour money into their inner city YMCAs where they were supporting the programs. Lancaster City hadn't done that yet. So we were an organization that about 2/3 of every board meeting we had, we talked about how far we were into our line of credit, how we were going to make payroll, and what we could do. great learning experience to look at a business that every day is looking at every bill and figuring out what bills we can pay, what we can't, and how we're going to make payroll. Great learning experience for me. But we did that, and we made it through that. LS YMCA, I guess I should have put more than LS. LS is an area, for those familiar, Lampeter Strasburg YMCA Round 2. So I did 6 years on the board of the YMCA the first time. Then Lancaster City decided they better start building some other Ys if they're going to make it. One of the first areas they looked to build a Y was Lampeter Strasburg. I was living in that area, had done 6 years on the Y board. They came knocking on my door and they said, we're going to do a capital campaign. We've got to raise a lot of money if we're going to build a YMCA. And they asked me if I would be on the lead gift committee, which means you knock on doors of very rich people and ask them for money. Not one of my favorite things to do, but that's part of what you do. I actually said no the first time. I was very busy at work and I was very busy at home. I went home and I was talking to my wife about this one night, and she said, you do a ton of things for the city, don't you? And I said, yeah, we talked about all the things I do for Lancaster City. She goes, well, LS is your backyard. LS is where your kids are at. Shouldn't you be involved in this one? Now, it's hard to argue with my wife, so I said yes. So I agreed to be part of that lead gift committee. Now, what I was smart enough to know, and I don't know that she figured it out or not at the time, I knew as soon as we raised enough money to build the Y, the first thing they were going to need is a brand new board to help run that Y. So of course, as soon as we got done raising the money, the comment was turned around and said, hey John, you've been great through this, can you be on the board? Hard to say no at that point. So I put another 6 years on the LS YMCA Round 2. What a great experience. Again, the fundraising, not one of my favorite parts, but you have to do it. It's part of the evils. But to build a brand new building, and that's what that board did. We had a pile of money over here, and we needed to turn it into a YMCA. We had a YMCA that had ground, no building, no staff, and no clients, no customers. So we built it from the ground up. Again, an experience that I would have never got to do as a lawyer. What a great experience. And again, I talked about the friendships that you build when you're down in the trenches. When you're down in the trenches trying to figure out what contracts to build, how big a building should be, what it should look like, what the timeline should be, what kind of staff we need, what are our financials, what can make this financially viable, all great experience that I wasn't getting as a lawyer. Center City Community Neighborhood Enhancement Corporation Connect, that was an organization, a grassroots organization that picked a part of the city and said, we want to help it. We want to help organize it. We want to help put lighting in. We want to help put a neighborhood watch group in. That was a brand new organization that never existed again. I was asked to help do that and ended up on the board of that as well. Family Funds Committee of First United Methodist Church, that's my church. We have an endowment fund like many churches do. I was asked to chair the committee that oversees the investment of those endowment funds and the use of those endowment funds. Again, with my financial background, that opened the door for me, but again, a great experience, not something I would typically do as a lawyer or be involved in. Lancaster Alliance. This was, Lancaster Alliance came about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years into my career. And this was, you start out again, Literacy Council of Lancaster, Lebanon. That was a great organization. It really spoke to my passion. It was small, it was hands-on, I understood it, it made sense. Lancaster Alliance was an organization, I talked about the dire straits the city was in the 96, 97, 98 timeframe. Lancaster Alliance was started by a small group of top executives. I'm talking about people like Dale High from the High companies, head of the newspaper, head of the bank, head of the hospital. These were all CEOs. Started this organization to try and figure out what needed to change in Lancaster City. I got asked to serve on that board and talk about an intimidating board. I think for the first several months I said nothing because I knew anything that came out of my mouth was already thought of or was just going to be plain stupid. But what a great organization, again, what a great opportunity to work with those people. So one, it was a great opportunity personally for me to watch these top-level executives and learn from them. But what a great thing when we look back on what the Lancaster Alliance did, and it wasn't alone, but it was a driving force behind the changes that we saw from 1996 to now. Great organization, an organization that I actually ended up then getting to chair, which was just a thrill for me. Actually, I'll drop down one below that Lancaster City Alliance, what we got to do. So as I headed that organization, there was another organization working in the city called James Street Improvement District. We looked at that. We know how critical dollars are, especially when dollars go to administration. So while I was chairing the Lancaster Alliance, we talked with JSID and we decided that it would make sense to merge the two organizations. Merging two nonprofit organizations that have two separate boards, quite a challenge. They had great history, great mission, great people on those boards. We knew we couldn't put the two boards together. It was going to be too big, so some people weren't going to be on the boards. It was a great opportunity to work with my counterpart who headed JSID and myself, work with our boards, figure out a way to successfully merge these two organizations together, still do the missions that both were doing, and do more. So great opportunity, and we actually successfully merged those. We just celebrated our first anniversary on July 1st of this year of those two merged organizations. I'm the vice chair of the new organization and will chair that organization come July. CRIS Authority. I don't know if in the local paper about a year ago started talking about the CRIS legislation. Senator Smucker was a strong proponent to get legislation through the state, and Lancaster City was one of two cities that was designated by the legislatures to be CRIS entities. We formed an authority to operate CRIS. Real simple, what CRIS does, it's an economic development tool. The idea is that you take a baseline of Lancaster City, all the businesses that are in Lancaster City, and then if a new business after that baseline is set is brought in, all the tax dollars that's generated by it through employment taxes, real estate taxes, all the different taxes that would typically go to Harrisburg come back to the city. And those monies then can be invested to continue to grow that. So the estimates are there'll be about $100 million over the next 10 years invested through CRIS in Lancaster City. A tremendous economic benefit, and especially, as I said, only two cities were approved, Lancaster being one of those. I was asked, I had two people I had run across, actually, Senator Lloyd Smucker. I met him, he was running a business. I actually met him at a community event. We talked, we became friends. I started representing his business. Then when he had the crazy notion of selling his business and going into politics, I continued to know him. He got to designate certain seats on the CRIS Authority. He asked me if I would sit on that CRIS Authority, and I'm the vice chair of that authority at this point in time. E-Town Family Business Center. When I was introduced 20 years ago, Dale High reached out to several different groups, my firm being one of them, to be part of the Elizabethtown Family Business Center. We've been there 20 years now. We're actually the only sponsor that is still with the Family Business Center. We've changed out sponsors, but we're still there. It's been, when I was introduced, and I made the comment earlier, I've gotten back more than we've put into it. We put our dollars and our time into it, but it's a great organization. It's focused on family businesses. Really the strength of the area that we see around here, and I think it's been good for the family businesses. It's continued to grow. The growth in it has been tremendous. And again, it was one of those things that I got to be in on the ground floor where we had an idea, we had a little bit of money, not a lot of money, and a college to match up with us and some sponsors, and we've grown that from nothing to, I think we're around 60 or so. 65 family businesses are there now. So we are one of the largest and oldest family business centers in the United States. A thing we say with a lot of pride. So, talked about why you should join. Talked about, again, gave you a little bit of my personal story of what it is. Some important things to think about when we do these things. One, and we see this, you can't just fill a spot. If you're volunteering, again, whether on a committee, on a board, on a project, if you're there just for business development, people will know that. People will see that. It'll become very clear. You know, they talk about the old 80-20 rule. 80% of the work will be done by 20% of the people. You'll sit on boards, you'll sit on committees where people are there, and they're clearly there they're not showing up to meetings, they're not giving input, they're not being active. If you do this, be active. It's important. It's a commitment of time and money from everybody involved, and that's what you have to do. Don't overcommit. It's a lesson that I've learned the hard way. I've overcommitted at times. It's hard to say no. Especially, these are all good organizations, and it's hard to say no to a good organization that has a good mission. But if you overcommit, going back to the first one, you won't do a good job. You can't be active in all of them, and we all have to remember we all have an employer as well, and you can't just walk away hours and hours and hours. You have to get back to your employer as well. So don't overcommit. And what I'll say is, again, going back to the first one, if you're active, if people recognize the skills, the knowledge and passion you're bringing to it, everybody wants you. So everybody's going to be knocking on your door. And it's very flattering, and as I said, it's hard to say no. But I've seen people burn themselves out, and I've also seen people hurt their reputation because they've overcommitted, and they're just not doing a good job because of that. You asked me the question, it's perfect. Have a passion for it. If you don't have a passion for it, you're not going to, again, I'll go back to that number one. If you don't have a passion for it, you're not going to be actively involved. You're not going to want to be there. You're not going to be trying to contribute more than you can to it. Really have the passion for it. I said stay in your comfort zone or move out. I gave a lot of examples of things that I did that I wouldn't have done as a lawyer. So we see people come onto committees, and sometimes we see somebody come on and say, I'm a lawyer. It's good to have a lawyer on this board. When legal issues come up, come talk to me. And that's okay. We need that. And if that's your comfort zone, that's fine. Other people come onto it and say, you know what? I do accounting 45 hours a week. I don't want to be the treasurer. I don't want to do numbers. Put me on the strategic planning committee. Let me work on that. Let me work on something and take me out of my comfort zone. Doesn't matter which, but think about what you want to do and what you want to get out of the board or the committee or the community involvement. Committee work. Almost all boards are set up that there's a board or maybe a 12 or 15 member board, and then there's 6 or 7 different types of committees under them: strategic planning, finances, audit, whatever it is. A lot of times that's a nice way to get introduced to an organization and go into one of those committees. I know for all the boards I serve on, we look at our committees as training grounds and in some cases, tryouts. Put somebody on a committee, see how they react to a committee, see if they're active in the committee, and then when a board opening comes, bring them onto the board. So again, a great opportunity to get a little bit, and from our perspective, that allows us to go into that organization, see how it is run, see if the mission truly is our passion, and if we're interested in going onto the board. Questions asked when approached. And this is important, and this goes back a little bit to my comment about saying no and not overcommitting. Instead of just giving a no when somebody calls you, because again, that's a very flattering call when you get that call from someone you respect and say, will you join this board? Sometimes it's easy to say yes right away, but really it's important to ask some questions and make some understanding. And people that have been on boards understand these questions. First, understand the mission. Again, I'll go back to that passion. Make sure you understand the mission, you like the mission, you have a passion for the mission. If not, then you really have to question why am I there, and can I really be a fully committed board member or committee member? Time commitment. Different boards have different commitments. No doubt about that. You should understand that. Is this, again, I talked about the Literacy Council. That was very hands-on. That was a lot of hours. That was a lot of late nights. It's just the way it is. I've been on other boards where there's a strong staff, strong executive director. They're really making sure that they're bouncing things off of the board itself, not as active. Find out what the time commitment is. Monetary commitment. These economic development corporations, these community involvement boards, they're all nonprofits, which means there's a component that they're always raising money to continue the mission. I said personally, I don't like raising the money, but that is part of what the obligation is. But right up front, one of the questions, the monetary commitment. I've been on boards where actually you get handed a sheet that says these are board member expectations, and one of them has a line on it and has a dollar number next to it. It says, here's how much you'll give to this board annually. Others strongly suggest you give. Almost all want you to give something so they can say at least all their board members give something. Understand what that commitment is. Some numbers can be big, some numbers can be small, but understand what it is, and understand that if you join that with that commitment, you'll follow through with that commitment. Strategic board or hands-on board, again, I talked about that a little bit. Some boards are smaller staffs and they're just more on the ground working, and in some ways that's a lot of fun. If that's what you're looking for. Other boards, again, they have a large staff in place, and really all you're doing, you're approving overall budgets, overall strategic plans, and you're making sure the staff is doing what they should be doing to meet those obligations. So what kind of board do you want to be on? And understand what board you're talking to. Who's on the board? I always want to know who's on the board. I want to know, do I know anybody on there? If I do, I'm probably going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call them and say, what's your experience been like? It's just important to do that and realize who's going to be sitting around the table with you. I'll go into my lawyer mode for a minute. Directors and officers insurance. I won't be on a board that does not have directors and officers insurance. Lawyers have gotten more evil and evil over time, so anytime something goes wrong, they name everybody in the world, and they often name the directors who are sitting on the board. What I'll tell you as a very general rule, it's very hard for a director to be liable for anything as long as they're being reasonable in what they do. Doesn't mean a plaintiff's attorney won't name them, and that means that unfortunately under our justice system, it's going to take three to 9 months to get you out of the case once you've been named, and maybe $5,000 to $10,000 because lawyers charge outrageous fees. Directors and officers insurance, what that does is says if you're sued as a director, and as long as you've not done anything illegal, the insurance will cover the cost of your legal fees to get you out of those matters. So to me, it's always very important to have directors and officers insurance. So talked about some of the things I've done on different boards, and I have to say, you know, had the pleasure of doing a lot of different things. I just named a couple here. Through the Family Business Center, I got to do two things that I really enjoyed. In the chapel, actually, we had two great speakers, and I got to do the introductions of both the Queen of Pretzels, Ann Byler's from Annie Ann's Pretzels. Everybody had an Annie Ann's Pretzels before in their life. Really good things. I got to get a hug from Annie Ann, and you can't beat that. And it was really just a pleasure to be able to do that, and it was because of my involvement with the Family Business Center. Next guy you guys might not have heard of, Dick Yingling. He runs a small brewery up near Pottsville, and I know none of you guys know who that is or anything about that, but we brought him down for one of our anniversaries. He runs a large family business, as did Ann. Great speaker. You know, I talked about communities being small, and you know, why the friendships are important, why the relationships are important. I was actually born in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. I didn't spend a lot of time there, but most of my family was from Pottsville, Pennsylvania. So as Dick and I were talking to each other and chatting before we talked, Dick actually played basketball with my uncle. They were both very good basketball players. So again, a connection I would have never thought of, but one of those great connections, all because I took time and I've been working with the Family Business Center. I mentioned already, you know, got to know bank presidents, business owners, other professionals, politicians. It's just been a real fun part for me. So again, you know, we do it for the good things that help the community. It's a lot of fun for us, though, and it's a great growing experience. Things I got to do. So as I said, the YMCA originally just had one downtown. It was a very old, beat-up building. As I was finishing off the first tour of the YMCA, we actually got to build a new building. Again, there's nothing better than taking the process where, and for that one, we had to sell the building, we had to find a new place to put it, we had to figure out how to build it, and move everything over to it. Great experience. And I already talked about the LS YMCA that I helped build. One of the organizations I didn't talk about was the Lancaster Community Safety Coalition. One of the studies that was done by the Lancaster Alliance was a safety review of Lancaster when we were going through '96. Crime had, both actual crime and perceived crime had become an issue in Lancaster. So we did a safety, about a 6-month, we brought in some experts and they helped us do a safety review of Lancaster and what it needed. One of the recommendations was build a safety coalition that would do a couple of different things. One, put some closed circuit TV and tie some together of the public areas so that we could monitor those. And the second was what they refer to as safety by design, and that was requiring actually when new buildings are built or when they're renovated, actually build them where you don't have a wall where somebody can hide behind the sidewalk at night and they can jump out. So we built an organization. Other cities have closed circuit TVs that are monitored. The majority of them are done by the police departments. We built an organization that is all civilian. It's a nonprofit. It's not part of the police. It's not part of the city. We raised the money to build it. We put the cameras in, and it's monitored 18 hours a day. We have both stopped crime. We have solved crimes through it. We've also benefited the community in other ways as well. It was just a great organization. Again, it was very unique. We took on some legal challenges and technical challenges that hadn't been taken on. Combined two organizations. I talked about the combining the Lancaster Alliance and Lancaster City Alliance and economic development plans. When we combined the Lancaster Alliance and JSID together to create Lancaster City Alliance, as I said, we just went over our first year anniversary. But at the announcement a year ago, when we announced we were doing that and brought them together, the mayor of Lancaster came to us and said, we need to update the economic plan of Lancaster City to go forward for the next 15 years. Would you guys take lead on doing that? What a great opportunity. He recognized what we could do and he allowed us to do that. It's been a great relationship. We're about halfway through that plan. And it's a really exciting time when you think about that we're sitting there talking about what Lancaster City can look like in 10 to 15 years. All right, so back to my Carter McRae story. So, as I said, there was a new superintendent in the Lancaster City School District. Rita Bishop, she came in, she talked to the different businesses. I had no children at the time, had nothing to do with education, knew nothing about schooling or education other than that I was there. And she said, we want mentors to come into the school. And she said, we want mentors to come into a school called Carter McRae. Carter McRae is an inner city elementary school, and it's across the street from what's referred to as the Water Street Rescue Mission. Water Street Rescue Mission is a religious organization that takes in homeless families. That's what they do. They provide a fantastic service of food and helping us step up. But it's in essence a large hotel for homeless or displaced people, and it's all focused on families, so there's a lot of children there. So probably over half the children that go to Carter McRae come from the Water Street Rescue Mission. So that's where they wanted, and I went to the superintendent and I said, I'd like to volunteer. I said, but Never been around kids, really. I was the youngest of my crowd. Nothing to do with teaching. And she said to me, she said, John, we want males, she said, because we want a male influence. And she said, show up once a week, do anything. Read to the kids, do math with them, and that'll be a great influence on them. I didn't know any better, so that's what I did. So I volunteered and started doing that. And I volunteered in a classroom of third grade students. The teacher was Mrs. Hendricks. I did that for 5 years. The very first time I showed up, I think Mrs. Hendricks was trying to teach me a lesson, and she did a good job at it. Walked in, she introduced me. She said, let's split the class in half and read to them. She split them by boys and girls. I got the boys, she got the girls. She went to one corner of the room, I went to the other corner. Went to a corner by the door. I think I had control of my third graders for about the first minute. And that might be an exaggeration, it might not have been that long. They were walking out the door on me, wandering down the hall. And Mrs. Hendricks finally came over and saved me, taught me a little bit how to control them. And that's what I did. Once a week I would show up, and sometimes it would be reading, sometimes it would be math. It was a lot of fun. But within the first year, I had a small group, and we were doing a math exercise in sort of a half-round table, and I was sitting in the middle. One of the boys had put his head down at the table, and I asked him if he was all right, and he said, I don't feel good. And at that time, I didn't know what the protocol was, so I went over. Mrs. Hendricks was working with another group, and I said, so-and-so is not feeling well. And she didn't miss a beat. She never looked up. She goes, go ask him the last time he ate, and I have food in the cupboard next to my desk. So I went over and I asked him, I said, when's the last time you ate? He said, lunch from school, the school day before. So he hadn't eaten for 24 hours. So we got him some food. But this was the type of class it was. This was a class that students would be coming. Halfway through the class, the family would move and would lose 3 students. Halfway through the class, a couple families would move in, would have 3 students that were probably a grade or 2 behind in reading comprehension just because they had moved so much. It was a challenged school and a challenged class. So I was doing this, and we started a class in September when classes normally start, and my wife was actually pregnant with our first child. And I started talking to the children about this when I would come in. And it really turned quickly that I really appreciated them, and I think they really appreciated me. So typically I would walk into the classroom, and I always felt bad. I'd cause disruption when I'd first get there. They'd jump up. I'd get hugs from about 2/3 of them and high fives from the other third that weren't going to hug me. And that's just the way it was. Then we'd settle down and we'd do our work. So September, we're talking about this. My wife delivers our first child in May. I actually missed two weeks in a row while that was going on. And so then I came back after my son Kevin was born. And I walked into the door, and it was eerie how everybody sort of glanced like a deer in the headlights, went straight to their desks, and had their hands flat on the desk. Not a word. I don't think that I had ever heard Mrs. Hendricks' class that quiet. And I really couldn't understand quite what was going on. It actually made me a little bit nervous. Mrs. Hendricks, I just stopped at the door. She walked in, and she walked me to the front of the class. She said, the children have something for you. And two of the children came up, and they had a bag. And they had bought 2 small outfits for my young son. She said, the children collected their money so I could go out and buy this. These are kids that had very, very little. I always remember that. And to me, that's worth giving back to the community. All the other things we talked about are great. When you can touch people like that, and that's what you do when you're involved in the community, a lot of good things can happen, but it can change us all, and we get a lot more out of it. That's what I have. Any questions? Thank you very much for your time. Thanks to E-Town.